views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. is our guest tonight. We'll ask him about Sunday's protest of the siting of a jail in Mott Haven, ongoing development in the Bronx, his point of view on correcting chronic problems with both the MTA and NYCHA, the political landscape, and much more. So let's get right to it. Please join me in welcoming back to BronxTalk the 13th president of the Borough of the Bronx, Ruben Diaz Jr.
It's always a pleasure, Gary. Thank you for having me.
Nice to have you with us. You came in, we're taping the show a little earlier than it's going to air tonight, and the news came out that Jose Serrano, Congressman Serrano, announced that he will not run for re-election, and also that he has Parkinson's, which is quite unfortunate, and we're all so sorry to hear. But maybe just a comment on him and his career and what he meant to you.
I wish him well. What people don't realize is that when I graduated, Gary, from Clark Junior High School, 149, in my graduation, even though we did the graduation at the auditorium at IS 184, the keynote speaker was then Assembly Member Jose Serrano. And so I've always known him, and by the way, his son and I went to PS 31 together. So the Serranos have always been around in my life, both politically and personally. The public should know that he's been representing our community since 1974, was the first year he got elected to the Assembly, became chair of the Education Committee, went to Washington, D.C. after there was a scandal in the Bronx, and there's never ever been, while we have had disagreements or people may disagree with him on certain stands, there's never been any dark cloud or questions of corruption or anything. He's always served us well. He'll continue to serve us well, and it comes a time when health is the single top priority. And so to the Congressman, thank you for your service. I'm sure we'll talk soon. Thank you for all of the years that you sacrificed to the people of the Borough of the Bronx and beyond because of all the issues. And we wish him well, and I'll continue to work with him over the next 2 years.
He certainly was a willing participant in the dialogue here, so I will offer good wishes to the congressman as well. So let's start there. He 76 years old, the longest-serving Hispanic member of the House. He was elected to office, as you said, 1974. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is 29 years old and only been in office for 3 months. Ruben Diaz Jr. is 46 years old. We're about to be 46, not that I need to remind you of
Next
that.
Next month,
okay. And has been in elected office for 22 years. Both of those Congress members are seen as progressives. Do you see yourself as a progressive, and you look at your body of work and you say, I've been a progressive? Put yourself in that political spectrum, and what should people understand?
So what is progressive? Is progressive fighting for the poor person? I think I've shown an entire career of doing that. Is progressive someone who supports marriage equality? I support that. Is progressive supporting women's right to choose? I support that. Is progressive making sure that we have an increase of the minimum wage and that we have pay equity for women? I support all of that. So I do consider myself someone who, time and time again, whether it's civil rights, whether it's making sure that policing is done correctly in our communities and to bring folks together. Yes, I've done that. But I've also have been involved in the economic development of the borough. So I'm what you call, Gary, a pragmatic progressive.
That's fair enough, and I wanted you to define that. Of course, people talk about you running for a higher office.
I'm also for protecting the environment. You know that we've done that in all my years in the Assembly, and so on and so forth. So I just appreciate all of the different voices that we have in the Bronx and beyond, and it's the democratic way.
Mayor de Blasio, when he ran for office, touted himself as a progressive. Do you think he has shown progressive policies all along?
Yeah, so you keep mentioning the word. It's hard to pinpoint the definition, especially when somebody like de Blasio has shown, I think, government ineptitude and inability to execute in areas, for example, in public housing. I mean, is it progressive for the mayor of the city of New York to allow for the conditions in public housing to be the way that they are now? I don't think so. Is it progressive to time and time again disregard and discount communities when you're making decisions on sightings of shelters? Not that I'm against shelters, but or sightings of schools or jails. Time and time again, while there have been some issues that I do agree with the mayor, these labels about progressive, I don't know if, what's the definition when the mayor has disproved to be progressive in so many different areas.
You are undoubtedly thrilled and proud of the development report you released a couple of weeks ago, $3.5 billion in development. What's your long-term vision of how that will ultimately play in the Bronx? Take neighborhoods like the Jerome Avenue rezoning or the Harlem River areas and certainly the Mott Haven areas in the South Bronx. What's your vision of what they will look like in 5 years, 10 years? So
the report is something that we are proud of because of almost $3.5 billion in development that we saw in 2018 is an increase, 25% increase from just the year before that. We've seen over 8,800 units of housing. Just a little shy of half of those have been government subsidized. This brings us to grand totals that have never been seen before. Since I've been the borough president, that's 96 million square feet of economic development. It's over $20 billion, close to $20 billion, or over $20 billion in private investment. We've seen over 45,000 units of housing. So when you look at the Bronx, Gary, the Bronx is not one size fits all. If you look at the Harlem River corridor, I think that we can do some high rises there. We could do mixed income. We could do some market rate there, but certainly have an esplanade. The Jerome Avenue corridor is not something that I would, this is something that we fought. Again, I was against the zoning, the new zoning that the mayor put out, the NYCHA, but nonetheless, I supported this rezoning so that we can do affordable housing where we're going to go as high as only 80% of the area median income. We want to do it in a way where we're making sure that people are going to stay in business for those that need that protection, especially in the auto industry. We're not going to be able to protect everybody. How do I see the Bronx and how do I see different neighborhoods? I see the Bronx, depending on each individual neighborhood, to have amenities, to have public spaces, to have beautiful and affordable housing, and to also create jobs for the people of the Bronx. But in order for us to do that, there's so many other things that we need to continue to work on, like health, like education, so that as we see progression in the borough of the Bronx, everyone has an opportunity to be involved.
Is the rezoning process, is that the way to do it? In other words, you looked at, let's say, the Jerome Avenue corridor and say it needs some work. There's opportunities maybe in the Harlem River area down there. Are rezonings the way to do it? I mean, was there a problem with this process?
There can be if you don't take the consideration of the community. For instance, in the Harlem River, over there in Mott Haven, the buildings that are going up by, say, Brookfield, that's not a rezoning. That's as of right. So the one way to develop communities is to work with developers and bring people in who not only want to do business in the Bronx, but as I always say, do business with the Bronx. And that means hire Bronxites. It means to get Bronx vendors. It means to get Bronx businesses to be able to benefit. When it comes to the rezoning, I think that we did a pretty good job working with the city council members there, Vanessa Gibson and Cabrera, and working with community folks. Look, not everyone is going to be happy, but when you look at least at the recommendations that I put out, I don't want to get too nuanced here, coupled with what Vanessa or Councilmember Gibson and Cabrera put out, I think that we did a pretty fair job there at recognizing all of the community interests and concerns and addressing them.
The next target is Southern Boulevard. Are you happy about it? Are there, things that you want to be wary of or want to advise people, hey, check this out? Do you have a point of view on that?
I always want to make sure, and working with Salamanca there, right? There are different needs that we have as well. So we don't want to go up too high. If we want to make sure that things aesthetically.
You mean physically high?
Physically high, yeah.
I see. Yeah.
Physically high. In terms of the area median income or the AMI and the rent levels, certainly that's not something that we want to go past beyond a particular point. So we want to continue to have that diversity, but it's not like it's going to be in the Mott Haven section of the Bronx. Mm-hmm. So, and obviously we want to have commercial space, and we want to make sure that whatever goes there is comparable to all the things that are happening in the local neighborhood.
I guess, like you said, customized with every community. You can't do it one way, certainly in the borough of the Bronx.
And that's what NYCHA was about, right? Or at least my opposition to the NYCHA, which is the mayor did a one-size-fits-all for the entire city of New York. There shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all for the Bronx, let alone for the rest of the city of New York when it comes to rezoning, because every community has different concerns and different needs.
So I got an idea. How about we put a jail on Concord Avenue? You like that idea?
That's an absolutely horrible idea.
You don't like that idea. You've advocated instead to put it in Concourse Village near the existing courthouse structures. The people in that, you get into not in my backyard. How do you view the whole thing now that you've certainly made it clear you don't like it?
Well, the first question we have to answer is whether or not we believe that Rikers Island should be closed. And I think that the overwhelming majority of people that I speak to in both neighborhoods and all over the Bronx and throughout the city of New York know that Rikers Island inherently is just a bad place that needs to be shut down. And so now, how do we do this where we have different jails and different facilities? Well, we have to speak to the experts and the advocates, and all of the experts, the overwhelming majority of the advocates in criminal justice reform, Gary, all over the country, will tell you that the most efficacious way to do this is to have the jail connected to the courthouses. It's been done this way in San Francisco, in Denver, all parts of the country.
It used to be in the Bronx, though.
Think about that in the 1930s, even when they didn't care about criminal justice reform, their plan was even better than this mayor, this progressive mayor, than his plan is now. And so this is bad for three different reasons. Number one, no one was consulted. There was no Bronx input when in this siting. Number two, the people of Diego Beekman and the surrounding area, not only were they not consulted, but they have a plan, and they've been working for decades to revitalize the area. And number three, going back to zoning, again, and this is important, we will set a bad precedent. You have a zoning for 4 different locations all over the city of New York in one ULURP. Mm-hmm. And one ULURP, when the Bronx's needs and concerns are different than Queens, it's different than in Chinatown and Manhattan, different than in Brooklyn. That's the reason why when we had our protests, it wasn't just the Bronx out there. You had community leaders and advocates from all different boroughs.
What gets in the way to stop the wheel from turning? And how does that happen?
Hopefully, I mean, now that we want them to stop the certification, I think that, they're going to move forward on that. Again, so much for being progressive. But as the process goes along, I would hope that the Planning Commission, there's enough votes there to turn this down. And then I guess the community boards, not only here, but in other boroughs, will also turn it down. I will certainly not be supporting the ULURP there. And then when it's all said and done, hopefully, hopefully it doesn't get that far, but then the city council members really have to pay attention to what their community is saying, not just in the Bronx, but council members from other boroughs.
Diana Ayala has, I guess, put out tacit approval. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
And that's disappointing.
Let's talk about something you did not mention in your State of the Borough, and it had been a topic we've talked about for years, literally. Mm-hmm. What's the status of the Kingsbridge Armory? Will it ever become the Kingsbridge National Ice Center?
Yes. So the status now is that the finances are in order. The loan, they crossed the T's and dotted the I's. The last time I was here, I said that they were crossing the T's and dotted the I's.
It's only taken a year.
I know, but certainly the financing had to be in order. It's moving forward now. I think the first phase of construction is going to happen in the next couple of weeks.
Let's talk about the borough's transit. There are a series of ongoing public speak-out sessions for the addition of long-awaited Metro North stops in the Bronx. If you were a constituent speaking at a hearing like that, what would you recommend, and what would you recommend to transit officials that they guard against as in terms of planning this thing out?
So, look, I've been involved in this since I first got to Borough Hall, and we're so happy that Amtrak finally signed the...
I know you had advocated about that.
Oh, yeah. We're not only with the elected officials but in the Bronx, but other elected officials in neighboring counties like Westchester. And we're finally at a place where we're going to get the 4 Metro North stations. I think that when it's all said and done, what I would like to see is, because, look, the aesthetically, they're going to look fine. We want to make sure that at least in Co-op City, that we're mindful of parking and how do we address that in that site. But ultimately, for me, it's about the fare, Gary. I would love for, I'm going to be advocating in a very forceful way now that we have the 4 Metro North stations being constructed, and that the fares, and not only for these 4 Metro North stations, but within the confines of the city of New York, are comparable to that of MTA fares. If we really want people to benefit from them, then they should
Don't charge them more than they would if they
more.
were to take the train
bus
or
or the bus. Exactly. So that's something that we're going to start moving on in a very forceful way.
You have advocated for city control over the MTA. How does that play? How would that improve things? Describe your vision of what that looks like.
So not the MTA. I want the viewers to know that the MTA is a bigger
That's true.
monstrosity of a bureaucratic system. And then with it, you have the LIRR, the Metro North, and then you have the New York City Transit System.
The transit system, excuse
So
me.
the New York City Transit System, I believe, should be under the control of the mayor and the city of New York, in the same way that it was up until 1966, when after there was a big fight between the governor at the time and the mayor. The governor decided to usurp the mayor's powers, as well as Robert Moses' powers, by taking the bridges and tunnels away from Robert Moses, and you know that was the purse, and maybe we should talk about giving that back to the city. But what we've seen right now is a system, just like we had with the Board of Education, where everyone blames and points fingers. No one knows who's held responsible. Since 1966, since the creation of this MTA, all we've seen is a bloated, bureaucratic system where more money going into this abyss and less responsibility taken up by anybody, and the services continue to decline. So what I'm saying is, it's not working. The status quo is not working. Let's change it. Let's give it back to the New York City Transit, to the city. The governor and the state can continue to have the MTA.
You could understand cynics who would say, well, wait a minute, the city doesn't manage certain things, and we can go right to NYCHA for that. And if they don't manage that well, why are we giving this entity this other very big problem?
Well, but at least we would know who to hold accountable. And so it's this mayor who's not done well by NYCHA.
The problems in NYCHA didn't start.
It did not
8
start.
years ago.
It did not start. But it didn't even start. 20 years ago. It started way before that. But what I'm saying is, again, NYCHA, for many years, people were saying it's part of the federal government, and whether the federal government was able to finance it. What I would say is that at least we need some accountability, and now we just don't have that. So when people are coming to the borough president, or they're frustrated about their bus or their trains, they're going to the state legislators. Who is responsible for our buses? Who are we going to hold accountable? At least, like we do with the Department of Education now, we can hold the mayor accountable.
And in a way, we'll get to NYCHA in a second. I just want to get to the bus thing. One of the assembly members in the Bronx told me, he said, if you look at all the transit complaints I get, he says it's not for subways, it's for buses. And is there a way to fix it, or the way to fix it is greater control over the management of it?
Well, right now, there's a gentleman by the name of Andy Byford. And you know that Andy Byford now is in charge of the New York City Transit. He has been doing this new Bronx bus redesign plan, and we have many, many different meetings with stakeholders. And it's really looking at how you reimagine all of the bus routes. I say that we give him the money and get out of his way. And the fact that
You have faith that he can
I
really
have
design this.
You know, and I was the biggest skeptic because he didn't come from, he's from across the pond, from across seas, but he has really grown on me, Gary, and he's been speaking plainly to New Yorkers. I just had a lunch with the Staten Island Borough President where they did this in Staten Island, and not only were they able to reimagine different bus routes, but when they saw on real time that certain things were not working, he was even open-minded enough to be able to tweak it in real time. And so now the borough of the Bronx is next, and I'm just thankful for all of the Bronxites that went out and allowed for their voices to be heard during these stakeholder meetings.
As a constituent of yours and of anybody else, this is my perspective. One of the items is those big articulated buses. Mm-hmm. They go rumbling through our streets in the middle of the night. They take up, how many spaces in the street. I would love to relook at that and see if there's a way to,
Well,
fix
look, this process isn't done. So you're a Bronxite,
Right,
you're a constituent.
Well, I got
I don't know if you went to any of the forums or the workshops.
They're still out there. Yeah.
Yeah, they're still out there. You maybe want to go and let your voices be heard, or you can go on their website and they're still taking recommendations.
Fair enough. I appreciate that. What did you think of the HUD regional director staying over at public housing? Was that an effective tactic? Was it for show? How did you view that?
I've gotten the chance to know her. I don't agree with her boss, the guy in the White House. But Lynn Patton has also been someone who has shown that she's really interested. And I wish that the federal government, I wish that the president and her media boss, the HUD secretary, Dr. Ben Carson, would give her the resources. But her staying over is not something that I admire and respect, but it's something that I call that every board member of NYCHA. We have some board members that are NYCHA residents, but not all of them are. And I think that every single board member should at least spend a week in the New York City Housing Authority, because this way they get a better feel. They get to understand. Right now, it seems like no one has really, who's making the decisions has really captured the sentiment of NYCHA residents, but at least Lynn Patton has.
I don't remember where I saw it, but somewhere I saw after that she stayed in the Bronx, there was talk that I think the number was $500 million being cut out of the federal support of NYCHA. Seems to me if it's like giving with one hand saying, okay, I sympathize with these people, but if you take away funding, it's like, how exactly are we going to fix the problem?
Well, again, I'm not her defender, but I don't think that she's the one who makes that decision on funding.
I'm aware of that.
All right, so that's why I would hope that the legislators, the senators in the Senate can reach some agreement with the now democratically controlled House of Representatives, and that the White House will sign off on more funding for public housing.
Are you in favor of the rental assistance demonstration, otherwise known as RAD,
Yeah.
which seems to be received well at Betances houses?
I think so. I mean, the jury's still out, but from all that I've been seeing, they've been able to not only have leveraged this so they can have more money and put it into the repairs, but as long as you have reputable organizations. So in Betances, there's Acacia. Acacia, shout out to Raul Rusi and Hector Diaz, former assembly member. These are folks that are in charge of this non-for-profit. So
it works if there are responsible people in that position.
In that position. And I think that it can, if we continue to do this, you can do the reconstruction or the rehabbing in a very expeditious way. And it could totally transform the way that NYCHA is able to finance, because of the RAD program. Now you can leverage what it is that you can borrow.
I remember you
bond.
as an assembly member talking about the environment at Hunts Point and excessive trucks, et cetera, et cetera. And you've always advocated for green technology as a borough president. I thought the solar farms and the way it's being developed in the Bronx is revolutionary and a tremendous concept. So why don't you take a moment and just talk about how proud you are of the fact that the borough of the Bronx has this system that can actually transform energy systems.
Well, thank you. And we did a huge solar farm on Commerce. We're talking north of 3,000 solar panels in the span of over 100,000 square feet on on a building of a factory over there, and we've done this with On-Force Solar.
There you go.
Thank you for helping me out there. And this is a program that is not just getting electricity for the actual building. Normally you would have solar panels that would power the building, or solar panels that would power the building, and then the excess will be sold and it just goes into this, the general system. Mm-hmm. What this does is that this solar panels or this electricity will then be given to people with of low income. Mm-hmm. And it would be able to reduce their electric rates. I believe that we need to continue to do more of this, and that ultimately, look at the New York City Housing Authority. You know how much money they spend a year on electricity? We should be doing this all over the place and using the electricity so that we can offset some of the costs in public housing, so they can use that money for their repairs.
I want to give you a chance to talk about Camp Junior, but just before we do that, what needs to be put in place, or is the mechanism to expand this program now already?
Yeah, this is in its infancy stages. We want to do 1 million homes and over the next 10 years or so. But I think that we should start being creative and not just look at low-income homeowners or people with homeowners that are struggling.
Save energy,
but we should do it. We should do
everywhere.
it to public housing and then beyond.
You are so excited about Camp Junior. Wanted to take a moment and talk about what it is, and we'll invite people to contribute and support and send their kids.
Yes. So working with Junior's parents, the state, the governor, the state parks department, and with Fresh Air Fund, we were able to have the governor free up 47 acres of land in Harriman State Park. As we speak now, Gary, we put in the capital funding to rehab the cabins that are there. And what we want is for the Fresh Air Fund to start working with Bronx organizations, Bronx schools, and Bronx families to send children to sleepaway camp for free during the summer. Wow. And we're going to name it Camp Junior, where they can learn how to fish, they can kayak, recreational activity, sports, so on and so forth. But they're also going to have a nonviolent curriculum, nonviolence curriculum added to it. And we hope that
non-confrontational, stop the bullying. Yeah, I mean, all the
stop the bullying. How do you deal with situations of disagreements without having it escalate?
Summer camp changed my life in a very positive way. It should change the life of all the Bronx kids.
So
Thank
hopefully
you very much. We did put the information on
So
the
the
screen.
very lastly, it's not just kids going away for free, but then for the 8 months, for the 8 weeks during the summer, we also want older teenagers from the Bronx to have the jobs up there.
Oh, okay. Mr. Borough President, always a
you.
pleasure to have you. We hope
Likewise.
you'll come back soon, and we'll see you certainly out in the streets of the Bronx.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, if you have further questions or comments on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, email them to us at BronxTalk@BronxNet.org. You can send us a tweet at BronxTalk or post them on our Facebook page. If you have questions for the Borough President, we will make sure he receives them and get you a response. Our producer is Helen Greenberg, directors William Guzman and Nick Marrero. We thank the Borough President, and we will see you next week. Good night. The Borough Credits while we shake hands.